Hello, I'm Graham Fitch and welcome to this next practice clinic where I answer questions sent in advance by Online Academy subscribers. And if you'd like to become an Online Academy subscriber, check the description box below if you are watching on YouTube and you'll find all the details. So the first question comes from MJ, who says, I'm presently learning Heller, that's Stephen Heller, Opus 47 number 15 study, but I'm having problems keeping up with the succession of broken chords this piece demands. Can you advise me on how to cope and memorize all the harmonic changes this piece has? Thank you so much. Right, if I play you just the beginning of this piece, just so you've got some frame of reference for what's going on. In the right hand, we've got broken triads. And in the left hand, we've got a melodic line, rather a sad piece. Marked adagio, but not too slow, otherwise it really doesn't flow. That's the opening, and the second phrase is actually identical, isn't it? Yes. And then it starts to develop a little bit. The accompaniment now goes into the left hand on the second page, or the second section. Very expressive right hand. So lots of harmony changes. Lovely change into the relative major, which we'd expect in a piece in a minor key at some point. It usually references the major. So those sort of big changes I think we'd need to know. We'd need to be able to really notice, G major, and see if we can find a new color for that key. It's a different sonority. But let's look at the specific question that MJ has, which is keeping up with the succession of broken chords this piece demands. He's also asking about memorizing all the harmonic changes. I don't think I would specifically try to memorize, but what I would do is to use deep learning practice techniques, which in this instance involve several things. One would be just for the shapes in the right hand. The shapes and the sound, we almost always have to go with the sound. We can't just go with technical stuff, what the hands have to do. We've got to listen. So if I play from the beginning, I would notice that the first chord is just the tonic triad. That's the home triad in the key of E minor. And it repeats for the 4 beats. And then afterwards, we've got the thumb stays the same, and the upper 2 notes drop 1 step each. So now I keep the lower 2 notes and move my pinky finger to the C, and then that stays for a while. The pinky then comes back to the B, and then down to the A. You'll notice what I'm doing. I'm only playing notes when they change. So let me just go through that again. Let me also keep a pulse. So what I'm doing there is recognizing the interval changes. What happens, these top 2 drop down a step while the thumb stays the same. The lower 2 stay where they are while the upper voice moves up a 3rd and then back down, filling in the 3rd. Then the thumb changes, but the second finger stays the same. The pinky stays the same and the lower 2 notes move up 1. That's one way of doing it, and I think that would be a useful thing to notice as you practice. So I'm blocking out the right hand there. Another way of blocking out the right hand is simply to play what happens on each beat and repeat the chord when it repeats. Let me try that again. And I may as well add my left hand. And so on. That's a very helpful way of doing it as well, in addition to what we were just looking at before. There are other things that we can do. I'm going to show you all of them. Not that I expect you necessarily to go through them all, but just so as you've got kind of a little toy box of possibilities for practice, because practice should always be playful, should always be engaging. We'd never want to do anything mechanically. So I'm listening, I'm feeling, and I'm noticing patterns. So if I go back to the chord progression, what I'm going to do now is just to make my awareness go to the individual notes of the triad. So we've got bottom, middle, top. So I'm just going to replay the thumb note. I don't need to play all four. Well, let me do it because I'm almost there. Now that does a few things actually. It makes me aware of my thumb note in relation to the other two fingers. Now what I'm not doing is lifting my finger up to the top of the key. I'm really just kind of like a double bounce, lifting the key up a little bit. Now let me do the same job with the middle note. And I can hear now the middle note. I'm going to save a bit of time, go to the next bar. Now my attention is solidly on my second finger, what it's doing, but in relation to what the thumb and pinky are doing as well. Let me do the same with my upper finger. You get the idea. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. Now I'm starting to become aware of a hidden melodic line on the top. I wonder how that would sound against my left hand. Now that's interesting. If you look at bar 3, and I'm now aware of my pinky finger note, or rather the top note of the 3, there's a nice contrary motion pattern between the top voice and my left hand, which we find later on in the piece quite a bit. And sometimes it's when the accompaniment goes to the left hand, sometimes if we look at bar, how many bars have I got there? That's 8 bars, so 9, 10, bar 11, for example. If I play you the left hand, there's action in the middle note particularly. And I notice there on the third beat, notice I keep saying the word notice, that's the whole point. I've got a radar that's on that's looking for patterns. So the interval between my pinky finger and my thumb is a minor 7th, and then it's a major 7th. I've got dissonance there. Now my middle note is going to move up a 3rd, but the outer notes stay as they were. Does that make any kind of interesting melodic design between the hands? Yes. So I would work along those lines, MJ. The other thing you could do, if you wanted to, a little bit of separate practice for the left hand, you could do a little bit of rhythm practice. It's quite helpful. I call this controlled stops. So we've got groups of 3. This is bar 9. I'm stopping on the first note of each group. I'm going to do this again, but this time I'm going to stop on the second note of each group. And so on. Right, with me? And then I'm going to do it again, this time stopping on the last note of each group. So you could either do it strictly rhythmically, ya-pa-pum, pa-pa-pum, to a pulse, or you could think of the floating fermata. So I'm going to put a pause mark, you know, the fermata sign. I'm going to put that on, well, let's go with the top note. And I can hold that as long as I need to get a really strong picture of what's happening next, so that I'm only playing when I'm ready to play. When you do it according to the pulse, you have to play when the beat arrives, but when you've got the fermata, you've got a little bit more leeway. Pause. Now I've got it really clear in my mind. So then I can play the next 3 notes. And when you get good at that, you can put the fermata in perhaps every half bar. Let me play you that, well, 8, 9, 10, 11 again. Fermata, pause. Now I've got the next group of notes all clear in my head. So once they're clear in my head, the hand knows what to do. The hand that obeys the intellect, that's Michelangelo, says that. So I think those stages would help you there, MJ. Moving to the next question from Rob. So when learning a new piece, how do you make the decision to move from slow practice in sections to full speed practice using the chaining technique? Rob also says, you suggest that once you start practicing at speed, you shouldn't go back to playing slowly. But I often find that attempting to play a piece at speed exposes problems that seem best addressed by slowing everything down. This is a really good question and really important points coming up here. So there are those that believe when you play a fast piece, you should never practice it slowly, because we're going to be using different sequence of muscles. If you want to explore this a little bit further, look up the term ballistic muscle. It's really what we want to do here is to sift out what's useful. So slow practice is useful at the beginning stages of learning something so that you can really, it's like separate hand practice. It's useful at the beginning stages so you can really hear everything. I've got from bar 30 of the famous Für Elise of Beethoven. I'm going to do it super slowly. So what are some of the things that are going through my head here? I'll tell you in a minute. Let me just get to the end of the bar. There's a lot that I'm able to do at that speed that I might not be able to do immediately at full speed. For example, if you look down a microscope at big magnification, you'll be able to see, you know, things swimming around in a drop of water. You can see all the atoms and the molecules. So I can now control my sound on every note. I can go for the balance of that chord so that I can make sure I hear the top note. I can also control the length of my left hand. So I'm going to lift my left hand now, let's say. And I can think about each of these left hand chords before I play it. I can focus my mind also on keeping nicely relaxed and aiming for good quality sound in my right hand. So if I didn't talk so much, I could claim to have heard every single note in my head before I played it. And sometimes that's called the speed of no mistakes. Not that we have to worry about making mistakes. We can't learn without making mistakes, just as we can't make an omelette without cracking eggs. It's dealing with the mistakes, if you will, that matters. So like a primer coat of slow practice, I think is really useful for most people, particularly in the elementary intermediate stages. It is possible to start learning something like this, provided you know how it sounds. You've got to have some rough idea of how it sounds, and maybe have had a couple of read-throughs, not too many, enough to acquaint yourself with the feel and the sound. It is possible to already play at speed micro bursts. Could just be the first 2 notes. And when you're comfortable with the first two or three notes, I'm repeating, but I'm repeating with purpose. So the purpose might be to do again what I just did, or to improve on what I just did. But before you repeat it, see if you can have very clear in your head what it is you're trying to improve. It could be physical comfort in my forearm. It could be the balance of my left hand. It could be making sure the notes sound dead together. So there's a little silence after the burst of activity, during which I assess, I appraise what I've just done and make a plan when I repeat. So plan, play, appraise. Now I think I'm ready to add another note. Finally, I hear you say. And at that point, that's the command for my left hand to release. And maybe I've got a little tension in my forearm, I notice. So now let me concentrate on my forearm. I want to see if I can do that, but brighten the sound up a bit. Yes, I'm happy with that. So I can say, I can tick. I could start then from the next spot. I'm now starting on my second beat. Yes. Nearly. I didn't quite like the feel of my left hand. So when I repeated it just now, I was focused on my left hand. Nice. Perhaps I'd then go over the bar line. So I've got this little snippet, and I've got this snippet. Now let me put that together. See if I can do that now together. Yes, I'm happy with that. It felt good in my arm, in my hand, and I think the sound was good. The balance there was good. So then I continue working in those little micro sections. But do bear in mind that it might not always happen in the practice session. You might have to go through the stages again the next day. Meaning, you might have to leave this not polished at the end of a practice session. It might not be yet perfect as you want it, but that's fine. Because nobody plants a seed in the soil and expects it to immediately come up as a shoot. No matter how much watering and sunshine and TLC you give it, you still need to wait. So you need to wait maybe 2 or 3 days before you can feel the benefit of what you've just practiced. So go back to it again the next day. Now, Rob's question was a little bit more detailed. He said that you suggest that once you start practicing at speed, you shouldn't go back to practicing slowly. No, I didn't say that. I said that when you're forming the reflexes for playing fast, as I'm doing now, don't go back to practicing it slowly at that point. Wait until you're able to play it fast, comfortably, maybe for a few days, before you then would go back possibly to practicing it slower. The reason for practicing it slowly is you can focus on the atoms and the molecules, you can focus on control, you can practice precision releases, balances, the sorts of things that go by too fast when you're playing at speed. So after you have formed the reflexes for speed, then you can practice both fast and slow. And you can go through those same stages that I just showed you again, maybe a few weeks later, just to keep things in peak condition. So if I go back to my gardening analogy, nobody's garden is ever finished, is it? You won't ever hear a gardener say, oh, that's my garden done and dusted. All I have to do now is to sit on the patio and admire it for the rest of my life. Every day in the garden is a new adventure for a gardener, apparently. So it is for the pianist who's practicing. We can never say we've completed our learning of a piece. It's ongoing, it's organic. So the stages are, for me, and other teachers might have a different plan, slow practice for the initial stages, then build the reflexes for speed by working in that quite laborious way, very much focus in the brain there. Afterwards, you can go back and do fast and slow in alternation with each other. I hope that clears that up. Charlie's practicing some of the studies from Burgmüller's Opus 109, and he's got questions about 2 of them. So, in number 5, La Source, the spring. When I say the spring, it's like a spring of water as opposed to the season. Can you suggest some ways to practice to help with that? So, the right hand is getting stiff and tired. So if I play a little bit of this, let me, just play a little bit. Okay, so let's look at what's going on there. We've got a melody line in the right hand and notes that are printed in small print. and then the small print notes, melody, all wrapped up together in a pedal. So the first thing I would do is to get an idea of the sound without the little notes. So this would be the first practice stage, one that you could return to as often as you want to, often as you need. What am I doing when I do that? I'm not just banging out the notes. I'm controlling the balance between the hands. We've got sixth there, parallel six. I want to make sure my right hand's a bit stronger than my left. Notice how I'm shaping bar 2, bar 3 as well, forwards. I'm aiming to use the fingers that I would use when I play all the notes, but mainly what I'm doing there is getting a sense of the line and the sound of the balance between the hands. I might then recommend doing a bit of right hand practice by itself. I often see this in piano forums about we shouldn't be practicing hands separately. Well, I would like to disagree with that. I think we do need to practice occasionally separate hands, but for good reasons. I want here to, I'm going to have my pedal with me because number one thing, don't try and join these notes, these melody notes. You can't anyway with a repeated note, the first. But I could imagine people trying to do this, holding on to those notes. There's no need to do that when the pedal's got them, because if you do try, you're going to tighten up your hand or you're going to risk tightening up your hand. So the motions, rotational movements, let me just map it out for you really slowly. I make my preliminary movement as preliminary swing, and because I'm using rotations, I'm going to go in the opposite direction first. Actually, sorry, no, this way. That's right. Can you see what's going on? I'm going to unpack this in a minute. You notice that I'm holding on to my elbow with my other hand. This is very slow. Because I need to make sure that my elbow doesn't dip. My elbow will need to move on horizontal level from time to time when the patterns move, of course, but I'm aiming to avoid dropping down here. So the motions are actually very straightforward. I've got here, if you do this in the air, do this big, put the hands on the palms facing up, palms facing round. So you won't get them exactly up again, but you can get them about 2/3 of the way. And now make that movement smaller. And then you've got a range of motion that you're going to use for the right hand. So let me do that again. Can you see how the palm of my hand now is at a 45-degree angle to the floor? Similarly there. So I'm flashing my palm to the floor there, and this palm can go a little bit down into the skirting board there. I'm aiming to equalize the motion, the range of motion there. And to start with, I'm not worrying about playing the melody line particularly strong. I'm just trying to get the freedom in the right hand, the right arm, not the right hand. So let me do it again. You might notice that I'm making a little adjustment for my thumb. I'm not trying to keep my thumb on the D. And you may wonder, well, why not? Wouldn't it make sense to keep the thumb on the D? It's not terrible in this particular instance, but depending on my tempo, when I play my C here, my thumb might have moved a little bit away from the D. It's not going to be miles away, it's just going to be maybe a tiny little bit removed from the D, which I can then move back to. So the idea of the rotational movements is it takes it completely away from the fingers. The fingers themselves aren't responsible for playing the keys. It's the forearm, and then the fingers are guided there by the forearm. So for practice, hopefully that's already given you quite a bit to do for the practice. You could, if you like, just experience the pairs by playing each pair twice. Let me do that better. So I'm feeling that my alignment is squarely on my first two notes, then it moves to the octave. Can you see the slight change of position between this pair and that pair? So there's flexibility here and movement here and not movement there. So the number 13, Charlie asks here about pedal. L'orage, the storm. Let me just find it. The pedaling marks are confusing me. In some places they feel much too long. Other places the release points are missing. You know, the little asterisk we see with this old style pedal marking. And in other places there is no pedal marked when it seems to be needed. Any advice? Yes, okay, so in the edition I've got here, I compared with another edition that I found online. They both have the same pedal marks. They're from different publishing houses. It leads me to assume, in the absence of an urtext edition, standard urtext edition, that these are probably the composer's pedal markings, written for a different quality of piano, a different different sounding piano with different resonance possibilities. They're kind of old-fashioned pedal marks, actually, because he's suggesting, Burgmüller's suggesting, that the first bar should be played in one pedal. Well, the piece is called The Storm, so, you know, you're going to get a bit damp, maybe a bit wet. But for me, that's a bit much, possibly, but let's leave that as a possibility. That whole of bar 2 in one pedal. And again, one long pedal. He's even asked in bar 4 for the pedal to stay down between those two octaves, presumably to heighten the effect of this storm. So you've probably got wind blowing, you've probably got rain falling. It's not a good time to be outdoors. So, you know, don't try and make it too neat, not this. That was with no pedal. But what I can do in that instance there is to perhaps have a little pedal for the first bar. I've got my pedal now just down enough. Can you hear? There's a little resonance coming from that, but not very much. So rather than a hose pipe aimed, I've got an atomizer, a little one of those sprays for the garden or for the perfume. The other thing I could do, let's say I'm not that advanced, I could change pedal on the half bar. I think I'd keep that for one bar on bar 2, but maybe change on the second half of the bar for the C, maybe. The third bar again, thin pedal. See, the thin pedal, what that does is it gives us the best of both worlds. It gives us some resonance. It also preserves some of the clarity. Maybe that's a bit too much. That's better. That's clear and resonant. Bar 4, I'd probably change on the A in the left hand. Now, in the next bar, there isn't any pedaling marked at all. So, does Burgmüller want this? Does he want this to be separated, or does he want it legato? To be honest, with no way we'll ever know. We can surmise that perhaps in the absence of pedaling there, he doesn't want connections because there's no way you can connect an octave. Here he's got a connection marked, but there's no pedaling marked. So do you see what we're up against here? I would say that in bar 5 you could either do it dry, could legato pedaling it, or you could direct pedal it, which means pedal down with the hand and up with the hand. That gives you something in between, some resonance on the beat, but also some punctuation. In the following bar, definitely 2 pedals. Change. Now the next bar, again no pedal marked. Is it this? Or is it? So the performer's job is to figure out what the composer meant based on the instructions. But then in the case of ambiguity like this, to come up with your own decision, make your own decision, and be proud of your decision. You know, this is what you mean, this is what you want to do, so I'm going to pedal it now. Again there, let me see what I was doing. I'm changing on the half bar. Half bar pedals there. Again, half bar pedals. This bar could be done in 1 pedal. Maybe a bit murky on our modern instrument, so maybe a half bars again. Thin pedals. Deep pedals. Like a song, a singer. In those last few bars, I like to hear clearly that left hand. But I also want some pedal, so again, I've got my pedal down a little bit. If I had my pedal down as marked, it would be a bit too much. Potentially, although you might like that sound, in which case, do it full. So you probably noticed what I was doing there was experimenting with possibilities and then coming up made a decision based on what I want to hear, right? So when I'm now playing on this instrument in this room, but if I were to play that in another venue with perhaps a drier piano, I might want a bit more pedal. So what will happen in the end, as you develop as a pianist, what you'll discover is that the foot obeys the inner ear, what it is that we want to hear. So there's a connection between what we want to hear and what the foot does. So we become masters of our right foot, well, and our left, but in this instance, the right foot. It's the depth of the pedal. It doesn't have to go all the way down. And we don't have to rigidly stick to the pedal markings we find on the score. So I hope that addresses that, Charlie. Marie is working on the ballade, La Ballade. I don't even need to say the name Chopin, do I? Maybe I should. No matter how much I practice, I can't seem to manage the right-hand spot in the coda from bar 216. I can do it slowly, but I get in a tangle when I play it up to the tempo. Thanks in advance for your help. Right, so if we go to bar 216, I'm going to slow it down so you can see what's going on. The right hand, let me put it together first. That's about 2/3 of the speed that you'd probably want to aim for. So the first thing I always do when anybody asks about the right hand is I'll ask them to play the left hand, perversely, because it could be that, you know, we spend hours practicing this right hand and we don't even listen to the left hand, don't even attend to it. But let's look at the left hand. And we've got now a line. Can you hear that? You have to feel that. But at the beginning, I want an accent on my second beat, and then a lighter bar. An accent there, and then something a little darker. What is this? Let me do that again. See, that shows me that my left hand isn't quite formed. A case in point. My left hand wasn't quite sure what it was doing here. So if my left hand isn't quite sure, how then can I expect my right hand to join the party when I haven't even bothered with my left hand? So make sure your left hand is amazing. And then let's look at the right hand technically. So what's going on? Well, I say technically, let's look at it musically first. There seems to be this line that goes through. Do we recognize where that's come from? I seem to remember an introduction, but before that, little turns there. And I seem to remember a Neapolitan harmony, flat 2. Right, so that's flat 2 and then 1. Flat 2, 5, 5, 7, 1. Here it is again in the coda. So I'm not just thinking about what my fingers have got to do. I need to be interested in harmony, structure, patterns. So sing the line. There's my melodic line, which Chopin has ingeniously made sound like it's in 3 octaves. Because the hand isn't big enough to make that actually tripled, of course, he has to suggest there's the top, there's the bottom line. Can you feel? That's the ear is picking up that. And then we've got in the right hand broken octaves. With another note in the middle to add little harmony. So that's the structure of the right hand. So the first thing I would recommend doing is to understand the mechanics of how we move. What I'm going to do here, again, I'm rotating. So the fingers are just on the end of the arm that rotates from right to left. I need to be free with that movement. Now, the problem arises when we have to now jump from that position to that position and then back to this octave. Now, the way I'm doing it is not to lift up into the air. I think this is the problem that you might be having, Marie, here. If you're trying to do that, it's going to take too long. You're not going to find you can get any beyond a certain speed. So here, a good example of where slow practice is only useful to a point. See, I could practice that slowly with wrong movements. And it's fine. I'm not going to be able to use those movements when I play it fast. Okay, so how do I get from here to here? Do you see how the rotation takes me? So I'm holding onto my thumb, I start the rotation, and I aim for the pinky to catch the A flat before it's come fully up to the top. It is possible. Do you see? So that's first thing. Now, how do I get from this position to this position? I forgot to say something here. Oh no, I didn't. It's good. So, bar 217, what I do is, when I rotate to my second quaver, second eighth note, I'm letting go of the second finger, but not the pinky finger. Because again, I want to aim for the thumb to catch the F sharp before the pinky has fully released it. And you may think, well, how is that possible with that big movement? It is possible. provided I don't hang on to my second finger. So I let go of my second finger early, and then back down. Do you see how I do this? It's not a lift, but it's a rotation in slow motion. You won't be able to do it in slow motion because you don't get the elastication that you need in the release. It feels really nice. So, you know, some preliminary work just with the octaves without the middle note. And then you can go back again. And miss out the top note and play just the thumb note and the third finger in the middle, or the second finger in this case. So when it's speed, you can see there that the movement is very free, but I'm really close to the keyboard. I don't have the time to come up. I hope that gives you some help. There are other things. I had a little look in my Cortot edition, because sometimes the Cortot study editions can be useful. Other times they can be deadly, some of the exercises he proposes. But what he wants us to do here is to play the main melody notes. That's useful, probably, possibly. And again, play these. It certainly won't do you any harm to do that, and it could be very helpful in the general kind of routine practice. So I think that would be my response there. And that brings us to the end of the practice clinic. I hope that's been helpful, useful, maybe interesting. And do send your questions in. Look at the description box for details of how to do that. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks for watching.